right. I think we have solved our technology problems. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us here. And thank you so much for introducing yourselves in the chat. While you introduce yourselves, I'm going to introduce our presenter today, who is the wonderful Catherine Cueva from Hempstead Union Free School District in Long Island. And now, of course, after all of that struggle of sharing my screen, I've lost what I was going to share about Catherine. I'm so sorry, everybody. Here it is. Thank you again for your patience. All right, so Dr. Catherine Cueva is the director of MTSS at Hempstead Union Free School District in Long Island. Dr. Cueva has over 14 years of experience as a bilingual special education teacher, adjunct professor, and board certified behavior analyst. Before joining Hempstead Union Free School District, Dr. Cueva worked as a lead behavior specialist, providing technical assistance to Long Island school districts implementing MTSS and PBIS. She has presented at local, national, and international conferences on special education, autism, applied behavior analysis, culturally responsive practices, English language learners, and family engagement. I have had the pleasure of working with Catherine for about 2 years now, and I'm super excited to have you all enjoy this fantastic presentation on the work that she's been doing in Hempstead. So without further ado, Catherine, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And thank you, everyone. I've been reading some of the positions, what you're doing in your school district, your experience. So thank you so much for sharing. And Claire, would you mind next slide?
Yes.
So the title of our presentation today is One Size Doesn't Fit All. One of the realizations that I have come up with MTSS is that it really is true to that not one system or one MTSS is going to be applicable to any one school. But what we can do is create an MTSS within our own school that is going to support all our students. And that is at the core of what I do every single day when I wake up to go to work, when I sleep. I will call this a journey. And I call it a journey because through my experience in supporting others and now having to implement this in Hempstead, it has been a journey of discovery of a lot of messy middles, celebrating small successes, even big ones, but also really looking at our MTSS in a more unconventional way, because the truth of the matter is that research is wonderful, but the implementation doesn't always align, right? Like it doesn't always look the same. So it's very difficult for me to have this conversation and not see people, but I'm going to keep on chugging along. Next slide, please. So today's learning objective is really, it's not going to be where I'm going to be discussing each of these components. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be sharing my story. And I hope that my story helps you with your implementation at your school districts. And that's really it. So the learning objectives that are here are all infused within my story. And so I hope that it makes sense, and I hope that you have some takeaways and that it becomes relevant to you. I will encourage you. I'm going to have some time at the end. I'm going to pause in the middle to allow for some questions. So please use the Q&A or the chat box so that I may be able to answer some of those questions that may be pressing or you may be curious about. Next slide, please. So I want to start with a glow. What we a glow in our school district is something that we want to highlight as something positive. Our school district is very commonly known, or have been commonly known as, the school district with the upside down triangle, which always bothered me. I really was not a big proponent of saying that our school district had an upside down triangle. And the only reason for that is because I felt that it had this negative connotation. It was all about who are we supporting throughout our triangle? So this concept of upside down triangle, I don't know, I'm not a big proponent of it, but nonetheless, one of the things I did say in our spring of 2023 was that we no longer could be called an upside down triangle. If can we be called an upside down triangle if our base is 50%? And I kind of figured no, because then it will flip and it will fall. Um, so with that being said, we started. I wanted to share this success because I felt like it was important to really indicate that we went from really having a lot of, a lot of students identify within our universal screener in the red, in that tier 3, and then we had several students, a few of our students that were identified, but it was more than this 80, this 80, 15, 5% that is across the research. So there was a lot of work that needed to be done. And I felt like the success was to really look at what the small changes that we were able to do within the 3 years of well, it's 2 years and 2 months, right? No, 3 months that I've been in Hempstead, and the work that we have been able to do as a team. Because this is, even though I'm presenting this information, it will it won't I won't do it justice without mentioning the amazing team that I have across the district, with our school leaders, district leaders that have been supporting this initiative of MTSS. So you could see from these triangles, these are our movement charts. We are currently using Branching Minds, and Branching Minds provides these type of triangles from our fall to our spring. So I'm not going to go into the nitty gritty of the numbers, but if you see green is good, and if you see that on the left side, our green was smaller, especially for the academic side, and then our green became larger, that is the concept. I do want to say something that was very interesting, though, and I think very relevant, and I hope it makes sense to everyone. We were first year doing our first last year was the first time we actually did a SEL universal screener and a student self-assessment, and we tier our students. And in the spring, I'm sorry, in the fall, we the data reflected one information, and then in the spring we actually showed an increase in students that were identified in tier 3. Um, some of the theory hypotheses that we were thinking about is that we did this second part of the assessment right in June, right after a flu of state assessments, a flu of universal screeners, test after test after test. And we thought, this may be interesting, something that we need to kind of look at a little bit deeper. And we're actually this year doing a mid-year assessment to see, was testing really a factor that potentially increased the need of our students that either self-identified or based on teacher report were being identified in tier 3. So that was just a little side note. So next slide, please. So this is our district in a nutshell, but our district is more than just this. I just wanted to give us a little information because maybe you in your district can relate to our school district and say, oh, well, this is similar to my school district and this may be relevant for me. So we have about 5,000 students, over 5,000 students. We're a Title I school district. And we have a lot of great things that happened last year in our school district. A couple of the great things that happened is that we were a school district in receivership, and we were removed from the receivership list. And what does that mean for some of you? Well, we had a state monitor, and we were basically told that, if we don't get our act together, that the state could take us over. So very fortunately, we were removed from that receivership list, both in the high school and the middle school. We had almost a 10-year long-standing non-compliance for FBA BIP in 2022, and that was removed. And that's how I actually 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, entered into Hempstead. I actually was supporting them and then fell in love with everyone in the district and began working with them. So the rest of the slides is going to basically be my journey in Hempstead, but I just wanted to share a little bit of who Hempstead is, so that it can potentially give you some thoughts of like, this is similar to our district, and let's see what she did. We have 50% of English language learners who are enrolled in grades K to 12, and we have a very large transient population. So next slide, please. So the first year of me being hired at Hempstead, I actually was hired as the RTI coordinator, so response to intervention coordinator, and I went there with lots of hope, many things that I wanted to do, and a lot of big dreams because I truly knew I was going to. This was a calling. This was it for me, right? An opportunity to make a difference in the work that I do. So what I did is I started looking and exploring. Where am I, right? Because one thing is supporting a district as a consultant, and another thing is truly living and being part of a district. So I was doing this consultant thing for many years, and now I was really being part of the family, and I was really welcome, but it took time, and I had to truly prove my worth in a way, right? And really do the work and see, and not just talk, walk the talk or talk the walk, one of those things that people might know. So Claire knows how I which one is it? Talk the talk or walk the walk?
It's usually walking the talk because when
Walking
we
the
say
talk.
something, we want to follow through with our actions.
Thank you so much. I happen to be an English language learner, and I still have sayings that I still don't always get them right. But nonetheless, I looked at the strength, and I wanted to really focus on strength with every system, regardless, or every school district, regardless of how it may appear. They have strength, and if you can't find them, then you have to go look for them because it's important. And it doesn't matter if the if there's an upside down triangle, or if the percentage of students in tier 3 and tier 2 is very large. You still have to find strength so that you can leverage those strengths. So the strengths that I kind of was able to gather that first year of exploration was, okay, they have an RTI. They have some kind of RTI. They were doing RTI, which I was like, you can't do RTI. You do intervention, right? We can't, like, so I started really looking at it from like, we don't want to say we're doing RTI. We want to look at RTI as our programs and what is happening within our RTI. There was paper-based data that measures student progress in some of the schools that I was working with. There was tons and tons, a lot of programs. I'm not going to exaggerate, maybe over 100, 150 programs, because we are and have been and continue to be an international baccalaureate school. And we believe that, we have to have tools for the different needs of our students and our teachers. So there was lots and lots of tools. Just a lot of them. And not all of them were used. So some teachers use some tools, some teachers use another tool, whatever kind of they thought it was needed for their students, but the data wasn't showing that was most effective. PBI was sort of implemented in some of the schools. And when I say sort of, it was kind of like we had a PBIS store. So, and they called it PBIS. And we know, for some of them that you may know, right? Some of the administrators here, some of the coordinators, and even the specialists here, that, PBIS is not a store, right? It's a whole framework of how to support students. So we had an SEL program called Leader and Me in some of our schools. So you hear this like pattern here, right? I keep on saying some, not all. And so there was this area where there was a thought of that some schools needed some things and other schools needed something else, yet we were still in one community with students who had similar needs. So we just had received the new ELA and math curricula, and um, and the new ELA curricula was aligned to the science of reading, but teachers were accustomed to using balanced literacy program and were part of the Lucy Calkin units of study and workshop model. So you can imagine having a new curriculum that is telling you, "Whoo, this is what you're going to do," and you've been used to doing something completely different. You can imagine what that kind of brought up. We had academic intervention services, which, because I know Clara and I have spoken about this, like there's people here from California, from different areas. Our academic intervention services is typically provided to students who are in grades through all testing grades, and who are students who are demonstrating one or a level 1 or level 2 in their New York State assessment. So we have those type of programs. We had one universal screener that was available for everyone, regardless of if you were an English language learner or not. And we had lots of teams. So we had a lot of people working, and they were doing a lot of work, but I don't know if the work was we were able to see the work because so many teams, right, meeting often. So that came with challenges, right? So we, like I mentioned some of them already, but one of them is one that I want to highlight is that even though we had this paper-based data, we really didn't have progress monitoring, right? Our progress monitoring was not normed. Our AIS teachers were doing work to support students, but it was not that they were keeping data in a way that it was norm data. And we were we once again, I mentioned to you that we were doing a balanced literacy program, and that was interesting. And um and we had inconsistent practices just across the district that really our team structures differ. It wasn't always consistent. There was a lot of inconsistency within our districts. I mentioned about the all the tools we had. It was just a full of tools, which was great. Many of you say, we hear a lot of people saying, there's a lot there's not enough resources. Guess what? We had them. We had the resources, but were they able to be implemented? I don't know. So let's go to the next slide, because then after kind of doing this analysis of some of our strengths and challenges, I had to get to action. So I always remember my first day at Hempstead as part of that community in that district. Um, I had previously been doing a lot of work within our behavior world, a lot of within the PBIS, the behavior part of the system. And so the academic part of the system was something I was passionate about, but not as had not worked as much in, right? I was a special education teacher, so I understood the academic. I have a child who has dyslexia, so I was always very passionate about reading, but um, it wasn't something I was doing it professionally at that time. But when I went to my superintendent on my first day, I sat down with her. I introduced myself again, and just thank her for giving me this opportunity to be there, to be at Hempstead, to be part of the growth and the family and everything that Hempstead represented it. And I said, okay, what would you like? What would be your priority? What do you see in my role? And she says, I want students to learn how to be readers by grade 3. And I have this program that we have just purchased, a high impact tutoring program that we just purchased, and I want you to implement it. And I was like, oh, okay, great. And I was like, oh gosh, I thought you were going to say, I want you to look at PBIS, restorative practice, something within my wheelhouse that I feel super strong about. But when she said that, I just looked, smiled, and said, I'm on it. And I went and I said, I spend days, nights, weekends researching everything, talking to colleagues, talking to anybody who wanted to listen to me and talk to me and teach me about reading instruction and everything, right? And I went back to the days when I was teaching my own children and things like that, and going back to that. And it was like a very big wow. So I even went, I just got my doctorate. So when Claire introduced me, it was funny because I even went back from my research, original research question, and I switched in the middle that nobody, please never, don't do, ever do this. Don't switch in the middle of your dissertation, your topic. I was doing suspension and behavior, and I got this challenge, and I said, no, I'm going to switch it. I'm going to switch it to science of reading. This is what my topic is going to be about within the RTI system and cultural responsive practice. So I switched it because I became fully invested in supporting reading in the district. So that's what I did. And I spoke to the director of humanities. I met with our director of English language bilingual world language educator, because guess what? We have 50% of English language learners. So now we're going to have to talk about reading, but we need to talk about reading in the context of how do we teach reading to English language learners? How do we support English language learners as they become readers in a new language? So I talked with everybody I could talk. I spoke to my curriculum instruction team. I became part of the curriculum instruction team. I said, I need to be in this team because I need to really support this. So we did that. I started going to PLCs, communicating, just a lot of doing, and a lot of just starting to drop the nugget of what science of reading was. Even though within a balanced literacy, I read that book, Balanced Literacy. I forgot the name of the book, but I read a book. I will, if I remember, I'll let you know. I've actually read 100 books, but that one book is Shifting the Balance. That was the book I read. I read Shifting the Balance, because we were, like I said, a balanced literacy school, a program where we were doing balanced literacy, so we had to shift that. I did that resource mapping, by the way, and then I did what I was doing with resource mapping. I was like, who are we using this book? Why? And when is this being done? I wanted to tier everything. So that was a big job, because imagine if you have a lot of resources, and somebody could put a lot of resources, could be overwhelming, and not enough resource could be overwhelming. It could be both, right? So thank you so much, Lainey, for saying that, because that is true. There was a lot, but we couldn't get rid of all of it, because what happens is that you don't want to get rid of something teachers are using, because you want to make sure that, that they feel comfortable. My first year, I wasn't getting ready for anything. That was not my job, but I was definitely having those conversations with the powers that be, to kind of see, who is using this? How much use is data? Let's tier this. Let's see what programs and what identifying. What was the book's name? The book name was Shifting the Balance. So who, what, and why, and when. So I went into this whole resource mapping, basically put every single program into a tier, said identify everything, put a purpose for everything, kind of like did a lot of work with that. It took me about 6 months to do that, just to get everything in some kind of, what I thought, some kind of order. And then I went to all the schools and spoke to the teachers and said, hey, do you use this tool? Do you even know that it exists? And just kind of had these conversations. I went to the leaders. Some of the leaders were like, I didn't even know that existed. I thought that was from years ago. Well, we still have licenses. So we did that. I started attending most IST meetings. IST stands for Instructional Support Team, and that's similar to, if you have an MTSS team, is you're like, when a student is identified like is struggling, and so they are now going to be your problem solving team. So that's what we call our teams. And I was attending those, and I was like, really, because I was under the special, by the way, one thing I didn't mention, I was under special education. My direct boss with the assistant superintendent of special education. So I had to kind of look. I was supposed to be some kind of the police, the special education police, so that, because we were getting tons of referrals, right? Just over and over referrals. And not everybody is a student with a disability. And not everybody is, we were just getting them all. So I was just attending to have these conversations because I have the bilingual background. And I also was a teacher, had received my extension in bilingualism, and I understood language with the difference between language difference and disability. I was starting to have these conversations, and I didn't want to take over. At first, I was just there listening to how they problem solve. I was looking at their data. What data were they using? Were they using data? Where's the data? So, and I just was there. And then I started just kind of interjecting, putting one question, dropping in another question, just to get people starting to think of the expectations. So I'm now called the data police. Yes, I'm calling a lot of names, but hopefully that's one of the good names I'm called. And in the meantime, I also started exploring a platform because I'm like, ooh, this paper thing, no, this is not working. And so I literally went through an in-depth exploration before I signed up with Branching Minds. I did. I looked at Panorama. I looked at RTI Direct. I looked at everything, EduClimate. I looked at everything that I could possibly know that was available. And then I came to a final three. I got a more than 50 people to kind of come to presentations. I had the salesperson in Branching Minds a year. It was a whole year of just asking 100 questions and meeting with him constantly and comparing everything, because I truly knew that first and foremost, we are a Title I school. So our money, we can't just use it and drop it and just do it, whatever. We need to be committed to it. And then I didn't only want to commit 1 year because I knew that money it doesn't always last forever in our school. So I said, nope, we can't do this if we're not going to be a 3-year commitment, because we need to kind of see, is this going to work? Is it going to make us more effective? Is it going to move us? So that whole year of immediate needs, it was just exploring. I didn't even purchase anything. I just kept on calling him. Does they do this? Do you do this? And then the most important thing I did, which I think is one of the things that I could share, was building allyship. And that's a word that she gave me, because I knew I was building relationships, right, with different stakeholders. And because I understood that in our district, there was something that we needed to do, is really build a relationship with every school leader, with every director. And we forget that adults need to trust you, that they can't, that you're not going into this school district. I mean, like the new one, new know it all. No, like you need to be humble and truly just say, I don't know anything. I want to learn what you have, and I want to leverage what you have, and I want to be there for you to create the systems together. And that was the most humbling experience, just to really try to work with everyone. So I literally felt like I just flew a lot of things at everyone. So I'm gonna pause here. Oh, before I pause, one slide over, and just doing that, one slide over.
This one?
Yes, and just doing that, we saw just doing what I mentioned that I was doing with our team, with the whole district. We saw movement. So just that. I didn't do big systems. All I did was tweaking, adjusting, talking, conversing, meeting people, and we saw movement. So could you imagine that we could see movement and change just by doing what we were just identifying and exploring and making programs in a tier? What you can imagine what next, can you imagine the improvement? As you can see from the beginning of this slide, it was a much better growth. So I just wanted to share that. Now I'm going to pause and give an opportunity to just reflect and say, okay, any questions, anything that you want to share?
We have some questions in the chat, Catherine. A lot of people were asking if you could share a little bit more about which assessments you use. So generally, which screeners you're using, specifically which screeners you use for your multilingual learners or your English language learners, and what you use for progress monitoring as well. Could you give us some insight on that?
Of course, I may. So we used to use iReady only and solely, and we then we I was hired at the same time as the director of bilingual and world languages director, and we joined forces together because we had a common goal and we were brand new to our roles, so we were like we glue in on each other. Because my experience was I had that background as well, so we understood that already they actually did not have a norm assessment for reading in Spanish. And we knew it was so important for us to understand the strengths that our English language learner come with. So we actually last year we she took a whole year also. We had a lot of conversations, and she actually committed to implementing Renaissance Star, which had a norm assessment for English language learners, a norm assessment for Spanish. And we thought it was important. We needed to know what our English language learners were coming with, because most of our English language learners happen to be their home language happen to be Spanish. We have some French, but most of them are home language Spanish. So we were interested in understanding that component, and and unfortunately, already wasn't giving us that initially. As far as progress monitoring comes along, we STAR CBM, the whole package, actually has a curriculum-based measurement, and so we started using the curriculum-based measurement uh, that will support that. We're doing that right now in K. Our interventionists are working from K to 6, so that's where we're doing mostly our curriculum-based measurements, and that's from STAR reading and STAR CBM reading, STAR CBM math, and guess what? We do Spanish interventions. So we have CBM lectura, which addresses the needs for our students who are coming with delays in their home language. But we know if we leverage their home language, that there's going to be transferable skills that they can bring to the new language of English. So we actually added that as well, and we have bilingual interventionists. So I hopefully that answers your question. I will take one more question and then move on so that I can leave some for
Perfect.
the end.
We had a question in the chat about which reading interventions, those programs that you have for reading intervention, which ones do you feel work best for your multilingual learners?
Oh, that's a great question. So that wasn't definitely in year one. We actually didn't have any intervention in amongst all those hundreds of programs that I mentioned. They were all relatively for tier one. So, and I'm talking about all these resources. We had Nearpod, we had Nucella, we have all sorts of resources, A to C, RAS Kids. We had a lot of programs and tools, but they were all mostly identified for tier one. So our first year, um, what we did is use the prescriptions, because we didn't even have Renaissance the first year that I was there. We used the prescriptions. This was our first attempt to intervention. The prescriptions that iReady would give you to support our students. I'm going to answer the question because that's a sneak view of what right now my year 3 is. We have right now corrective reading, so that's been implemented for the last 2 months. One of the things that I don't know how I got little balloons.
I can't help you. I don't know either.
So we are in our first 2 months of corrective reading this school year, and we already are seeing some positive results. One of the things that I did do also that I didn't mention with my resource mapping, and I was having collaborated with my entire curriculum instruction team, is that we were looking for true research-based tools and programs. So I went on every single program, and I went to ESSA, like ESSA.com, and look, are these evidence-based? I was really looking to make sure that just we have tools, but are they really all evidence-based? Do they have the level of research that we want? And I wanted high level of research. So This year, we implemented corrective reading, which has a very high level of research backing it up. And guess what? Only in this last 2 months, we already are seeing growth. And we're doing the progress monitoring for oral reading fluency. We're doing a pre and a post test. We're rocking and rolling. We do 6-week cycles, but I'll give you that more in my year 3. So hold on.
All right, we'll try to come back to more of those questions, but yeah, let's jump in to the next slide.
So year 2. So remember, I'm entering my 3rd year. So this is last year, 22-23 school year. And now I partner up with Branching Minds. So that was a great thing. And they actually have, beyond their platform, they have an infrastructure, professional development. They have infrastructure team and coaching. So that was, for me, super, super essential. I needed it. And I'm not here trying to advertise Branching Minds, but truly, I don't think I could do this without it, to be honest. Because what I noticed is that one thing is the platform. And I always say the platform is going to be there or not be there, but the infrastructure needs to always remain. And that was the most important. So I'm hopeful that we can continue with the platform because it makes life easier. But more important for me is the infrastructure and the work that I'm doing right now with Branching Minds, and I was doing in year 2. So in year 2, we started with, like, literally, remember, like, first year, I was just trying to figure out my own way within a pretty large district, not maybe larger. Some districts are super large, but my district, I felt like, 55,000, 5,600 students. That's pretty large, I think, in my opinion. But, uh, so we said, okay, well, we need to create a condition for a successful MTSS. So that was actually technically my first year of implementate of what we call the installation stage. So now I'm using terms from implementation science. Why? Because I had learned a lot about implementation science, but one thing is making how everything looks so pretty, like I said in the research. Everything looks so nice, and that, oh, you do this first and then you do this. um, but it looks very different sometimes. So anyway, we were working on creating a condition for successful MTSS framework. The main thing we noticed is that the language was not, we didn't have a common language. Like, why? Because guess what? All our schools were kind of working in sort of as silos, right? So we needed to kind of create this district kind of look at, and we're all kind of at this together. We're a community, right? We're not schools on our own. We are a community. We're a larger community. So important to create that common language. And that was the initiative last year. And I started basically with 5 words. 5. What is MTSS? Multi-tier systems support. We started, what's tier 1? What's tier 2? What's tier 3? And what is differentiation? And those were the 5 words that we kind of like stuck with, to kind of create that common language across the district. And I created a lot of paper. Oh, that was the first year. Like the first year, I created a lot of paper that I was then shared with my coach from Branching Minds. I shared with my coach. I said, "Here, I have all this that I created in the first year. Can we kind of, like, instead of like being all separate, can we kind of get it all put in one?" So that was that second year of creating these things and creating that common language with all the things that I was trying to develop, right? We also, with Branching Minds, I didn't really want to roll out for everybody. So we put I was trying to get all the data into Branching Minds, and that took a little bit, because I wanted all the data that was relevant to teachers. But I also wanted to check, we had a lot of tech things, right? There was some systems within our technology department that were very difficult. So guess what? I was becoming the technologist. I didn't care. There was no job. And you know how people say, in districts, stay in your lane. Well, guess what? MTSS is not a lane that I knew how to say. Like, it was every lane. Like, I was all over trying to say, okay, where's the data? Is this data accurate? And working with the team to ensure that that was happening. I was honored that the superintendent came to me and said, we have AIS teachers and we want you to now be a director. So I was like, whoa, really? A 1 year promotion? So, because I kept on saying MTSS, so guess what? RTI coordinator wasn't applied anymore. So they gave me a promotion. I became the director of MTSS, which means that with that role came with me that now I was going to be supervising the AIS teachers and I said, AIS teachers now we need interventionists. So I started transitioning. Talk about common language. I started transitioning, and I kept on saying AIS teacher, also known as interventionist. Now everybody calls them interventionists, which is amazing. Like so, you can like I kept on comparing those two: AIS teacher, interventionist, AIS teacher, interventionist, and we decided to implement thankfully we had like some grant money and we implemented a tier 1 SEL program which fell under my umbrella. By the way, yes, I have a lot of hats, sometimes too many, but grateful that I have these opportunities because then I could see the impact. I like again working with that director of bilingual and world languages. Oh, she decided that we're going to do Renaissance Star, see Renaissance Star. So we started um, assessing our universal screener where we assess students in English and in Spanish. We started only with our transitional bilingual education classrooms and with our one-way dual language classrooms. She's doing a lot of other work that I can't even touch, but she's doing a lot of work, and because of our collaboration, she's doing a lot of MTSS work within her department. So, and we started doing that initial training with our MTSS teams. So that school psychologists and social workers, school leaders, and all that initial work. And then we got this really amazing opportunity to get about 50 people across the district from K to 12, so that we can then build out our MTSS handbook development and build our infrastructure. And when I say build our infrastructure, it was looking at what we already existed and actually put it in writing. And so that was a big task. It took it took basically the whole year to do that and the whole summer to kind of edit it. And and then I was given an opportunity to have a person that could support me, an MTSS interventionist coach and an MTSS behavior interventionist. So a shout out to you guys if you're here, because if you're here, I told you to go to somewhere else so that I could learn. But if you're here, thank you for all you do and support the work. I get teary-eyed when just thinking about that. But anyway, because there was tears. And this was when I met Claire and throughout this whole process. And Claire, one day she called me and I'm doing all this work. I'm running around doing all the work, just chicken without a head, but truly with a lot of focus because I'm not I'm a very focused person. So, but it was a day that I was just, whoa. And then Claire gave me the term messy middle. And here I was, year 2, in the middle of, oh, there's no end to this. There's no end to it. And I'm not going to do it justice and I'm not going to put Claire on the spot, but this is how I interpret the messy middle. So the messy middle meant that there was a lot of things going on in the middle, right? That was right in the middle of implementation, but that there was a light that if it was not messy, then it's not happening. And so my interpretation of that is that it's messy because it's happening. And it's happening. And because it's happening, there is something that is to be said that now there's going to be something in the future that is going to be better because the messiness has to exist in order for light to happen at the end. And that was my interpretation. Like I said, I'm not going to put Claire in the spot unless she wants to kind of explain it in her own way.
No, that's perfect.
But that was it. So with that being said, I went and there was a lot going on. So just so that everyone knows that it wasn't like an overnight process. We built our Tiger Hub, which was thankfully for our behavior interventionists help to do that, so that we can start really aligning our MTSS, because we didn't want to just align it to the academic. And my passion has always been, I'm a BCBA, for goodness gracious, a behavior specialist. I needed to kind of build that other side up so that we can start looking at how behavior influences academic and academic influences behavior. So our next slide, please. Thank you, Sharika, for saying that. This was our timeline. We did this build infrastructure, and this was just basically our timeline. Now, look, pretty timeline, pretty timeline. It doesn't, within that, there was a lot of 100 little things, little fires that happened, many, many things. So the implementation and planning for rollout really happened through that summer. I kind of worked nonstop because we wanted this to happen. And I worked, like I said, with our teams to make sure that it was happening. And now we are in year 3. So year 3 of me being at the school district, which means year 2 of MTSS implementation, sort of, right? So the next slide, please. So this is where we are today. Oh, no, before we are, right? So right in between that, we had to reflect and plan for 2023. So this was the work of the summer, starting the fall of this school year that we're in. And um, our um, our school district, our superintendent adopted this saying, where we are now have to kind of look at things from this perspective of glow, grow, and go, which I think was so amazing. And we love doing that because now we're constantly really in that reflection process. And we started looking at our tier 1 data because, as you heard from me before, right? One of the things that we did is I didn't start in tier 1, which everybody says, what? What do you mean you didn't start in tier 1? That's where everything, the baseline. Well, we had too many students in tier 3, and I have to prove myself. Remember, I still had to build allyship. I had to build relationship. And tier 1 was way too big of a project to take on. It was just way too big. So I started where I could, where I was given a little leverage when I was moved from a coordinator to a director position and given the academic intervention service teachers, which now becomes who now we're now are recognized and known in my school district as interventionists. That was all new. So I was like, here, this is where we're starting, because I was going to use branching minds. I was going to put plans in place. We were going to do progress monitoring consistently. And I couldn't do that in tier 1 or tier 2, like, honestly. And that's just the reality of my situation. But I knew that the problem wasn't in tier 3. It wasn't that I didn't know that, by the way. I just want to make sure that I'm very clear that it wasn't that there that I was not the problem. Like, I didn't recognize that the problem that we needed to address was in tier 1. It was just that there was a locus of control that I had that I had to start with in tier 3. And so when I was able to move and show that with this level of structure, we were going to move to tier 2 and tier 1, we started seeing that impact of intervention. So just so that but we knew that tier 1 data we needed to do something with this tier 1. We needed to do something. So this year we I work with my coach again, because I don't work in isolation. I work with my team again. And next slide, please. And we created an implementation with the focus of tier 1. And so my coach says it all the time. Thank goodness to her. A little shout out to Megan. But I had to say her name. I don't know if I'm allowed to do that, but
You're
I did.
allowed to do that.
I did. A real shout out, please. I couldn't do any of this without her. We started creating an implementation plan, and the implementation plan was focusing on tier 1. And she developed and helped me create this amazing little template. We did a handbook rollout implementation. I did a whole PD plan for the entire school year. Look at the organization. I don't know if you guys remember right from the beginning, for those who have been here from the beginning, like, it was a little hot mess up there in year 1. Now in year 3 of my family with this district, because it is a family for me, we were in a different stage, and we put in an implementation plan, which we're right now implementing, and we're still learning and growing with it. Um, and that's where we are. And we have made a lot of changes. And so I'm going to say we have interventionists still doing planning, putting plans in place and branching lines. We have intervention taking progress monitoring. So that tier 3 is still happening, but that's my small lift now. I'm supporting that. That still be monitored. And I have the staff. Thank goodness I have no, well, three. No, let me not forget. We have a new person this year and under my team. We have three people, one academic interventionist, one behavior interventionist coach, and a MTSS data monitor, actually, who's a point 0.5, and an MTSS support who's here. So I don't know if she's here at this presentation, but she's here in the summit. And those are the people who are supporting this support. And so we have our big lift, and then we have our smaller lifts, which is a term that Megan uses a lot. So let's go to the next slide. And no, there was one more slide before that. And then
Sorry.
And another slide right before that. And then
oh, goodness.
So she went
fast.
This
is the next one. Yeah.
Okay, so with that being said, with that implementation plan came what we needed to do, which I'm doing like literally last month, because that doesn't mean that just because we have an implementation that's going to be the perfect. What we started to notice is that we were getting a lot of initiative fatigue, and all I was hearing from teachers is, oh, there's so much stuff happening, and the school leaders and everybody. Why? Because our departments, even though I was part of the curriculum administration, our department were doing different things. Now we have interventions, phonics for reading for interventions. We were doing, we have bridge to reading. We started doing it because we started realizing the need for a phonics program. So there was a lot of things that were happening. We have a new math director, and she had her initiative, and our bilingual and world language director has some initiatives. She just started a new E&L integrated program. So there was a lot of stuff happening. And it seemed like it was not all put together, but at the end, guess what? It's all tier 1. We need to kind of align. And so we had to find our why, your why, their why, everybody's why. Again, collaborating, communicating, meeting with school leaders. Like, what is our why? What are we doing? We did this huge initiative inventory. And then we started looking at how does our small lift align, connect with our big lift. And our big lift has to be connected to this implementation plan we have. And how are we doing that? So we are meeting next week. So I can't give you more information on that. But we are using our continuous data-driven improvement process to ensure that what we're doing is not too much, but just right. And with that said, I would open it up for questions for the last few minutes that I have. And I think I'm done, right? That's the questions.
Yes. Fantastic, Catherine. Thank you so much for sharing your journey from your perspective as the MTSS director of Hempstead and before. What an interesting presentation. So many rich nuggets in there. And I'm very touched that moment we shared about the messy middle has stayed with you. It stayed with me too. I remember in that moment really wanting you to see everything that you had already accomplished, and that you were so focused on everything that wasn't yet accomplished. And what a rich representation of what this process can really be like. We have some great questions in the chat to carry on with here. Something that came up was, what type of guidance do you provide to the schools in relation to the language of intervention and supporting your multilingual learners?
So what kind of language? Well, first of all, we look at our multilingual learners from a strength base. There has been many aha moments now that we are assessing our students in both their home language and English language. And what we are doing now is really looking at that data very carefully to put the right levels of support. So we actually, like I said, we have bilingual interventionists who are supporting our students and are supporting our students in in the area of need. And then we kind of separate what is intervention, when is a student may need intervention versus a student who needs services and support. So a student who needs to acquire English and who is demonstrating that there is delay, and the universal screener is showing us as urgent need, well, does he really need intervention, or does he just need time to acquire the English language? And how long are we giving these students to acquire this new language, right? And because we have a big, large transient population, some of our students are coming in third, fourth, and fifth grade. Now they have their language, their home language is pretty much decently established. But then we are in a very high poverty school district. Some of these children have interrupted education. COVID didn't help at all. So the language that we use is really looking at strength-based for our English language learners. We are looking at who needs support versus intervention. That's important. Strength-based, always. And what are they bringing to the table? We need to know what they're bringing to the table so that we can provide the right level of support, because our multi-tiered system is all about what are students bringing already, and what can we do to continue to support you so that you can be successful as a student. So I hope that answered your question. The next question, please.
How did you support your staff to analyze the data on a regular basis and respond to the data?
Well, that's an ongoing process, really, because remember, this is our year two of this is my year, year two, year three of me to be in there, but year two, and we're still working on that, right? The first thing that I did last year was, hey, look at the data that you have available in Branching Minds. Woo! Because they could do like historical data. So I had them look at historical data, how students are growing like how it looks like historically, year after year, what a student's performing, even in the nicest lot. My director of bilingual world languages was looking at how students are doing, performing in the nicest lot. Nicest lot happens to be like some of you guys do WIDA. It's just the assessment that we use in New York they have a baseline and to show progress and how students acquire English. So we were looking at that data. We started just looking at how the students perform in the state assessment. And I am not sometimes, we can get into the weave of data, and the weave can be okay, right? Because we have to kind of like peel the onion. But sometimes this global picture, just starting somewhere where like just having a very global understanding of the data and just what it kind of represents for your students. And my biggest saying is, you need to know your students. Who's in front of you? You should know who's in front of you, and that's who you teach to, right? So that's how we kind of are looking at it, and we're still working on it right now. Working with our curriculum and instruction team and our assistant superintendent, we are looking at our formative assessment and our benchmark data, which I think is more relevant to our classroom teacher. Because guess what? Universal Screeners helps us support us to put students in tiers proactively so that we can provide the right level of support. But benchmark data is what needs to drive instruction in the classroom. So that's kind of where we are right now. The analysis is a work in progress. We're kind of just there right now in the last 2 months. So I'm still working on it. My goal is to be able to go to PLCs and make sure that our teachers are really understanding the expectations of how to use their data to inform their instruction.
Wonderful. We have so many questions, and we're definitely not going to get them all out there. So I'm so sorry to everyone. I'm sort of picking one at random here, but there are a lot of questions about how you've approached behavior, and specifically, maybe you could speak to behavior screening and behavior progress monitoring, Catherine, with the last minute that we have here. How have you approached that?
That's a great question. And I could always, and I will offer this for questions, I could do like a response answer, and that could be shared. So for the questions that weren't answered. So Claire will give me those questions, and I could do it like a Q&A, and that will be sent out to every participant that was here as best as I could answer it. So to answer the question about behavior. So we started looking at our SEL screeners, as everybody knows. that I mentioned that earlier. That is something that is through Branching Minds, or their Branching Minds has two types of screeners. But as far as behavior, we actually developed something called our Tiger Hub, which is all our resources. And what happened is that we noticed that there were so many referrals. So we created actually a flow chart where it kind of dictated, and we aligned it to the code of conduct. And we said, what are level one behaviors? And if a level one behavior happens, what do you do? And here are the resources, and here are the things what you do. And then first you have to do this step. You have to you have to kind of look at it from that perspective of like, what can you do in the classroom as an educator and a teacher? And here are all the strategies, right? And this was like a really a long process. It was a whole year to create all these resources. Then after 3 weeks, but the main thing that we were communicating to our educators, one is letting them know that behavior takes time, just like academics, right? You can't expect the student to learn how to read right away. Right? If he or she is not unable to read, or did not get the phonics instruction that he or she needed. So the same thing, we need time. So we kind of put a timeline where we're saying week 1, this is what you do. Week 2, this is what you do. Week 3, and we kept on increasing what this educator or the staff members in the school need to do with each week, and depending on the level of behavior. So for example, a level 1 behavior, which is sort of like a classroom managed behavior, we would do we did 8 weeks. With a level 2 behavior, we did 6 weeks. With a level 3 behavior, we were like immediate referral to MTSS to put supports in place to ensure that this student, we are really there's restitution, restorative practice, something we need to do, because obviously the behavior was egregious enough that we need to do something immediately, and we can't just wait. So I hope that answered your question, but yeah, we are working in that process, and that's only been in implementation for the last 2 months. One of the feedbacks that I got, just so that you guys know, even though I'm creating almost like the framework, we have to train it up. So it's great to provide resources and resources to our educators, but guess what? I'm constantly reflecting on what I need to do, and we need to train up. So we are in the process of professional development galore when it comes to really showing what strategy is level 1. How do you implement it? What is function-based thinking? What are understanding functions? So that's where we are. So we have some kind of like sticks and infrastructure, but a lot to still kind of go through. Hopefully next year, part 2 of this, I'll invite my bilinguals and world languages director, who knows, and we'll add more and share more. Thank you so much, everyone.
Fantastic.
Have a wonderful.
Thank you, Catherine, for such an incredible presentation. So many questions lingering in the chat. There's one more that I want to ask, which is, are you willing to share your contact information out for people who would like to ask you more?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, I used to say, this is, you guys are going to love this. So my first year, I used to be like 24-hour respond rate. Like I would respond within 24 hours. Second year of me working at MTSS as a director of MTSS is like 48 hours to 72. Now I say possibly a week. If I don't respond, I love emails and I'm very good at responding. It might take a week. If I don't respond, please send an email again. Because guess what? The reality of my situation is that I get a lot of emails.
Fantastic. So we'll include your email in the follow-up to all the questions that we didn't get answered today. And if others want to connect with you directly, then they can connect to you by email and hopefully get a response within a week or a second week. Thank you so much, Catherine. What a rich presentation. Thank you to everyone who attended, and have a wonderful rest of your summit.
Thank you.